Hello and welcome to the OLM Dev Working Group. Today is Thursday, March 24th. On the agenda today, we had discussing Ruckpack milestones and doing some issue grooming. So to begin, I thought maybe we can either look at the current release or we can, the current milestone, or we can look at the next milestone. I think maybe for folks on the call, it might be beneficial to go through the current milestone, what we're currently working on with Ruckpack. And then take a look afterwards into the next milestone. So here's 0.2. This is currently what we're working on in Ruckpack, and we can kind of touch each of these issues individually. The most important issue we have in 0.2 is to support CRD validation checks. This is similar to the behavior we get in OLM. Where it does some checks to ensure that you have safe upgrades between different versions of your CRDs. And I think the direction we took here is we want to add this as a webhook, as opposed to directly sort of being part of the provisioner itself. I think our goal there is to say that this might be useful as a standalone thing. And so this is the top, I'd say the top priority thing that I think we're trying to integrate into Ruckpack right now is a webhook that does some of the CRD validation stuff. So does anyone have any questions on this? I guess what question we had was around how we want to structure the webhooks in the repository. And there was some soft consensus around structuring everything under the command directory. That would actually be a great thing to talk about, is how do we think about structuring webhooks in Ruckpack in general.
Just a quick question on that. So by moving that into a webhook, does that preclude you from using that test within another API? Like if you wanted to do a dry run or some kind of pre-check?
Yeah. So I'm sorry. What does it preclude you from?
Well, I'm assuming when you say a webhook, I'm assuming you mean like a admission controller.
Yeah.
You watch the CRDs as they're applied to the system and see if they're going to break the previous CRs that are applied and so forth.
Right. Okay, and it breaks the dry run function. I see what you're saying, right? So in theory, if you had this encoded in the logic in the controller, then you could just sort of do a test.
Yeah, that's what OLM does today, right? So it kind of does, it built a plan and it tries to figure out, it calls some APIs to figure out if what you've got is going to work before it even tries to apply anything to the cluster. This one, you've already done the application, and so you're kind of locked into that mode.
Right. Can we use kubectl dry run? Like, so server side, like the dry run command, you go to apply some manifests with kubectl, let's say, that hits the API server now.
Do webhooks get invoked in that case, though?
I think this is it is an interesting question. I think like a lot of the value that at least I was looking for when we were thinking about going this webhook route was that now I have something that encapsulates just like this distinct from Ruckpack issue with upgrading CRDs that you could potentially install separately from Ruckpack, and you could validate against that. You could also use that same logic locally if you wanted to do a dry run without hitting the API server. But it was mainly for like factoring out this like distinct bit of functionality and then just like relying on all of the responses from the API server being like this opaque thing that we could just put into the status of a bundle instance when we're applying it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got to think about it. Think about that a little bit. So do you guys have like a design that you're kind of heading towards? Because I see you've got all of these. Clearly you've had discussions and thoughts about how this works together. Have you guys kind of put together like a flow charts and things like that, class diagrams of how you think this thing would all work from an architecture perspective that you could share, or is this kind of all you've got?
We have high level docs and the readmes, both for more on sort of how the APIs work, how they work together.
I mean, I've seen like the HackMD, documentation that's been out there for quite some time.
Yeah, no, we have some newer docs, but I don't know if we have, if you're asking for like the provisioner specific architecture docs, we have provisioner docs that are pretty up to date, but they're more at the high level of.
Okay, let me take a look at all this again. I kind of lost track of it because you guys got really busy on it. I'll hold my questions until I can read through all this.
Yeah,
Okay.
Chris, I would just quickly mention that we've been moving super quickly with this, and so even
Yeah,
some
I
of
used to
the
subscribe
APIs
to
that
your.
we've been moving.
Yeah, I used to subscribe to this, and then my inbox got full, so I had to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think we're hoping to have something more solidified a couple sprints down the line, assuming there's capacity at the Red Hat side of this. But yeah, certainly a busy repository.
Yeah, I'd also say that like we called this the V0 version of the plain bundle manifest because we expect to continue making a bunch of breaking changes to it potentially. So anything you read is still subject to change at this point. I think we're starting to solidify, like, okay, we've iterated on this pretty quickly for the last month or so, and I think we started to kind of gel some of our ideas, but they're not set in stone by any means.
Yeah, so with that, I guess another thing mentioned here is we want a simple way to skip CRD validation or like force apply some manifest. So that's something that I think was generally an ask on the OLM side of things. So with this CRD validation, it is a follow-up. I think our goal in this milestone is just to incorporate the validation, rather the CRD webhook, and then I think as a follow-up we want to do the ability to bypass it essentially. So that's for this one. Does anyone else have anything they want to add on this particular ticket or issue rather? If not, we can kind of jump through the rest of them. Next one is adding support for Git repository. I think this is really interesting. It's basically, as it sounds, adding support for sourcing content, bundle content from Git. It's really the first time. So OLM's kind of gone outside the idea of a container image and it's starting to source content from something else. We've been working on this on our end, and when it works, it's really quite nice because you can just point your bundle to an arbitrary Git repository and it can pull it down and create the content. So and it should work for any remote Git based URL. Under the hood, we're using like the Bitnami Git image to pull down Git content. I think we probably need to change that. But it's sort of.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was saying it's just sort of agnostic to whether it's GitHub, GitLab, or like your own Git, or should work in all cases.
And so I think the major contention has been how much do we implement out of the box and expose as like a first class thing on the on the Kubernetes API versus how much do we just rely on the fact that we have some generic URI scheme, and you leave it up to the provisioner to sort of figure out, how they want to source that. And it's not clear to me whether we've come out to a good rule of thumb there. So
Yeah, Nick,
I
it might
digress.
be worth giving some more context potentially. So I guess there's like these two train of thoughts, and Nick alluded to one of them where the end-to-end strawman, so that document that Chris was talking about earlier that's been thrown around quite a bit, has a pretty small API surface where it's almost prefix-based URI, and the provisioner is responsible for deriving configuration from that. And then recently we've been working towards this kind of union-based explicit source type. So in the context of a Git, it would be like a spec.source.git, or container image would be spec.source.image. And so we've been kind of working out the usability gaps with both those approaches right now. Is that the kind of like right summarization, Nick? I just want to give more context to those that haven't been maybe as in tune with those discussions.
Yeah, and I think Chris has a really good question in the chat, which is jumping out to me as well now. Too is, what's the demand for pulling from what are we pulling from a Git repo? Just the bundle file system, right? But if you're running what does this look like in terms of a pipeline, starting from a Git repository, applying a bunch of like, let's say, bundles and bundle instances to a cluster? Like, how useful is this, and how would you rig that up?
Yeah, I think if we take a step back and try to think about, well, how valuable is a container image? So a scratch-based container image that simply wraps manifests. It was nice in terms of exposing and helping like guide some of the provisioner implementation, but certainly expanding to different source types was the goal. And so that was more in line with what this ticket was purpose, but maybe the inverse of GitOps seems a little weird to me. I mean, essentially you're still sourcing from Git, and you're ensuring the workload is kept up to date, or it's reconciled on cluster. But certainly having to avoid the extra pipeline step of packaging a set of manifests, essentially static manifests, into a container image. Yeah, so I guess just like adding another source type and figuring out where the gaps lie, and having multiple different ways. Sorry, that might have been a bit of a tangent. I don't know if that was kind of that answers your question, Nick.
Another more practical question in my mind is also in the file-based catalog format. We have an image field that's first class on the bundle type. So like, at least right now, like this is not usable when you're using like an FBC OLM.bundle, because there's no way to say source this bundle from Git rather than an image. But that doesn't mean we can't go and change FBC later to support something like this.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten into the translation from resolving on a cluster to a set of bundle instances yet. Isn't that a big open body of work, Joe?
Yeah. So that's a really good point. So like we have done nothing with DEPI yet. So DEPI is the thing that theoretically is going to read the catalog and decide here's the set of things that need to be installed, and then a controller that knows how to take that set of things and create bundles and bundle instances for them. So yeah, we haven't done any of that. The bundles and bundle instances are basically the foundation. These are kind of the equivalent of pods, but for like sets of manifests. So we're really trying to focus on getting just these two APIs to be extremely solid before we start building anything on top of them.
Yeah, so those are all good points. I think as we add this new source type, we sort of discover some of the usability gaps. And we do have a doc that explains sort of the plain bundle spec at a high level as well, and how it sources from different content sources. So this one. Next, we have document, what I was just talking about, documenting the plain bundle format. Next, we have this interesting issue around enforcing name length and content validation. I think this is, Aki, this is something that you actually went and implemented in a webhook, which looked really good. I think basically what the idea is, we want to reserve some space in the name of the bundle, such that there's when the provisioner adds their own prefix or whatever to some of the unpacked bundles and some of the other things that they're doing, that the length doesn't exceed the maximum 63 characters. I think the question with this one is more along the same lines of, okay, we want to implement this sort of name length check as a webhook. Where can we put that webhook? This webhook becomes sort of a core Ruckpack bundle API webhook. So it's pretty much, Aki, if you'd like to talk about your PR, I think it's pretty much good to go. It's just a question of where.
Yes, just only maybe if we have to adjust the directory structure or repository structure, I can move around some files. That's the remaining things. Just we need to get the consensus of the location.
Yeah, I think besides that, it looked great. So that's this one. Keep going here. Slack channel for Kubernetes Slack channel for Kubernetes workspace. I don't know if we had too much progress on this.
Yeah, I think this is something that just get bumped to 0.3 down.
Okay. We can go
This
ahead.
PR would take about 10 minutes to put together if anyone's interested in doing that. But I don't think
it sounds like we're assigning Joe as the signee for this one.
Shouldn't have spoke up, should I? You can assign me.
But what should be the name?
I would probably call it like Ruckpack Dev.
Okay, are they okay? We have 3 Slack channels, right? So every time we have a new version, we need to add another one that see right. Are they okay to add the individual development thing?
I guess we'll see, right? If we submit the PR and they say, "What the hell is this for?" Then we can try to make a case or not, right? Maybe they'll say, "Well, you already have an OLM channel, so use that." In which case, we can say, "Well, okay."
Okay.
But I feel like, at least internally at Red Hat, we've got our own Slack, and sometimes, we start chatting there without really thinking about, like, oh man, it'd be better if we just had all these conversations.
Yeah, I'm excluded, so.
Right, which we don't like. So I don't think we necessarily want to tie like OLM with Ruckpack, like Nick just said. So that's why I think like we have a case for having a separate channel.
Yep.
I think we can go and ask for it, and we'll see what they say.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add some color there to Joe's comment. Yeah, that internal Slack channel is pretty active, and that's probably my fault a bit, but oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. I lost my train of thought. All right, never mind. Ignore me.
Upstream is better.
So let's okay. Well, Joe, I don't know. You sort of volunteered to to just quickly look into this. Hopefully, if they come back with something with the yes, then that actually would be great if we could just have a very active channel in Kubernetes workspace. Be great. Using HTTP server instead of pod logs for bundle unpacking. Joe, you had a PR up for this. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, so there was some concern with the current unpack style, which is unpack is a pod that writes a map of paths to file content into the pod logs, and then the provisioner controller knows how to go and fetch those pod logs and read them. There were some concerns that, well, maybe those pod logs might disappear after a certain period of time, might not be quite as robust as something else. So one idea was, well, rather than have the pod exit and spit out its logs and then exit, we could just have the pod sit there and run a really small web server that basically serves the content of the bundle over an HTTP endpoint. So that's what this does. I started looking at it though. It's like every single instance of a pod. So we're going to have a pod per bundle that we've got on the cluster. And that takes like 4 to 5 meg of memory just to run the pod. So when you start adding that up, if you have 100 bundles, then you've got lots and lots of, what is that? 400 or 500 meg, which seems like a lot just for this. So that's why this hasn't merged. The PR hasn't merged yet. I think we're thinking about some other options, which gets into some of the other webhook stuff around making things more mutable and some stuff that we could talk about separately. But so I think we'll probably end up just closing this depending on what the outcome of some of those other conversations are.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that, Joe. And lastly, this is an issue that I added recently. I don't think it's going to necessarily make it in 0.2, but right now the unpacker is sort of the binary that we use to write the bundle contents out to the pod logs in the unpack pod. It skips directories. So if you have a directory structure where let's say you have a bunch of plain manifests and then you have another separate folder called like CRDs or something, and you have additional CRD manifests in there, it won't go into the CRD directory. So it ends up potentially skipping over some manifests. So this is something that we do need to look into in order to have Git based bundles unpack successfully. I think with the image based plain bundles, we can sort of mandate that the structure of the manifests are there all in the manifest directory, and it could be like flat, it could be like at the top level. But if we're supporting arbitrary Git repository with some folder or arbitrary folder with some manifests in it, and that folder may have subdirectories, then we need to support unpacking subdirectories as well.
So Daniel, what I would probably say here is that the unpacker should be given a root directory to unpack, and it should walk the entire file tree and unpack that. So in the case of like a Git repo, if the bundle is in like /bundle inside the Git repo, then we should have a way of like launching the unpacker to tell it, here's where I expect the bundle to be. It's in the /bundle repo, unpack from that perspective. And the reason I say that's how I think we should do it is then the unpacker can be used for any bundle that has any file structure whatsoever. And then it's up to the provisioner basically to walk that file system and decide what's valid and what's not valid.
Is that not just like walk?
Yeah.
In Go or whatever? Like I'm not quite sure what we're building here. Are we building a specific thing that unpacks and understands the plain bundle schema, or are we building something that just walks directories? Or is this more of like the whole orchestration of like pulling out a something from a Git repository and dumping it into a place and then traversing it?
In my mind, like we should try to decouple all of the different moving pieces of a provisioner. So like in my mind, unpacking is just walk this file, walk this directory and give me a file system back. And then the provisioner, which knows about a certain bundle type, can say like, okay, I'm a plain provisioner, so I'm going to look in a certain place to get the schema for this bundle. If I find my manifest in a certain place, or if I find a metadata file that tells me what version of the plain manifest bundle this is, then like I'll interpret that file system the way that I know how and either spit out an error or not. But if we structure it that way, then the unpacker gets to just blindly hand a file system off to the provisioner, and the provisioner doesn't have to like have specific knowledge of how the unpacker should work. It just gets handed a file system and gets to.
I don't know if you can decouple those two things. I don't know if you can decouple the unpacking of a specific schema to the cluster from that schema itself. Right.
I guess what I'm saying is like if we assume that all bundles, the meta API of a bundle is just a file system, then the unpacker can be the abstraction that hands the provisioner a file system, like a fs.fs.
But the provisioner is being handed a bundle with a location of where to go get the thing, and the provisioner is what should be responsible for getting the thing, not some unpacker that runs outside of that. At least from my perspective. Maybe that's maybe this is still, I'm being too I'll retract my claims and we'll talk about it on here.
Yeah, I think so technically, Nick, what you said is still the case, right, Joe? Basically, we have a provisioner that's responsible for basically building up and firing a unpacking pod. And so the provisioner is still responsible for deriving configuration to that pod. It just, at the end of the day, everything that needs to be sourced is volume mounted into this unpacker container image. And now the unpacker gets to be agnostic and just treat everything as a file system. So it is still the provisioner deriving configuration. It's just this single unpacking component is super agnostic and relatively, I guess, stupid for lack of a better term. So realistically, it's on the client to do a lot of this stuff.
It's basically just like composing the different tools that we think that all provisioners are going to need, right? So like if we can build libraries out of the individual pieces, then it's easy to build a new provisioner because you've already got some stuff you can pull off the shelf. But it's up to that provisioner to decide which pieces to pull off the shelf.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. So this one, so we'll see. We'll leave it in 0.2 for now, but I think it'll get bumped. So that was a quick run through of 0.2. I'm really glad that we still have some time, plenty of time left, so we can look at 0.3, whatever we have in our next milestone. I think we can start by talking about this issue, add support for embedding bundles in the bundle instance spec. I think this was an interesting use case, and there was some discussion around just-in-time unpacking that corresponded to this particular issue. I know, Aki, you commented on this issue today.
Yes. So, yeah, my last question is: so when we created that embedded bundle instance, do we create a resource of the bundle, or just do without that resource created?
when the bundle instance is when the bundle is embedded in the bundle instance and then the bundle instance is created, does that then create a bundle?
Right.
I think so. I think this feature might need a little bit of design. I think the answer is it should, and potentially the question is whether or not that bundle that then gets created is owner-ref by that bundle instance. Right. The question of can those two resources have different life cycles, like, or is the intent that if I embed my bundle in my bundle instance spec that I do want them to be life cycled together versus separately? If you see an argument for one or the other.
I would definitely probably lean to it should be life cycled with bundle instance and therefore owner-refed by the bundle instance.
In that case, okay. In the case where it's embedded.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
I was
think
thinking about, yeah, we can like in a bundle instance, we can put the bundle status inside as optional. Then when without creating the bundle resource, just handle everything in the bundle instance resources. That is one option I thought. So that's way, right? Yeah, life cycle is the same, just one instance.
I think like once like you embed it in the bundle instance and the bundle instance controller sees that and knows, oh, okay, I know how to go and create a bundle for this. Almost from that point forward, it looks the same as the code that exists now, other than like we have to know how to look up that bundle for this bundle instance. So like the bundle status, the status for the bundle would go on the bundle, the status for the bundle instance would stay on the bundle instance. And there might be a little bit of status on the bundle instance that talks about the status of its referenced or embedded bundle, right?
I see. Yeah.
Joe, didn't you have an original concern about this? Maybe it's further up in the comment chain around, oh God, I'm blanking on it. It wasn't just in time unpacking, but potentially immutability. Yeah, immutability.
Honestly, I think this makes the immutability story easier, right? Because if you change your inline bundle, then what I would expect to have happen is that either I go and change my underlying bundle if we say that bundles can be mutable, or the controller says, okay, let me create a new bundle, flip my reference over to that somehow, and then delete the old bundle. But either way, like it becomes a lot, in my mind, it becomes a lot more user-friendly and understandable to say like, oh, I changed my bundle instance to refer to another inline bundle. And you don't have to necessarily think about the mutability of the actual bundle itself at that point. In my mind, this is a separate conversation, but in my mind, I still am thinking of bundles as pretty much being immutable. But I don't think this really, I think this is a little bit orthogonal because in the case that a bundle is immutable, then if they were embedded, then yeah, you would just create a new bundle based on the change that was made in the bundle instance. Hopefully I'm making sense.
There's certain parts maybe of a bundle that are immutable around the content of what's there, but maybe not. Like let's say you went to go, if we did something like annotation projection, you know, on deployments, replica sets, and pods, which is where this sort of draws from. There are certain things that like are immutable, and that immutability propagates up to the deployment and propagates downward, and so maybe there's some wiggle room there. Though it is probably orthogonal. You're right.
Yeah, and my inspiration for like immutability around all of this is like focused mainly on pods. Like I kind of envision the bundle instance being a pod and the bundle being the pod.spec.image. So like the example I always think of is if your if you're referencing a pod.spec.image that uses a tag, and then that starts up and starts running, and then later you go and push a new SHA to that tag in your repo, nothing happens on the cluster. Like you just keep running that thing. The way to like trigger that is to have some higher level controller that maybe is watching that tag, deletes the old pod, creates the new pod or whatever, maybe uses a deployment and causes like a rollout to happen rather than touching the, like having the pod reconcile it itself. So in my mind, like if we build these two APIs to behave like that, then like we can start building some of that other logic on top to like decouple these kind of things and make it easier to reason about. But I agree, Nick. I think there's like I was messing with pods the other day. It's possible to go and like change the labels and annotations on a pod. So those things are immutable. So the question is like, okay, well, what exactly is mutable and immutable then? And then what then propagates and what doesn't? So that's where I think things get pretty interesting.
Yeah. No, I think the immutable, I don't know if we have, I think we have a issue for that somewhere. I'm not entirely sure. I know we have some open PRs that address that. That Joe, you made some with PRs, so I think we'll continue looking at it as we keep moving along. Another interesting issue is add support for label selector of bundles in the bundle instance API. This is something that was part of the original ED strawman. This idea that we can have a bundle instance match on, for example, labels, rather than embedding the name directly of the bundle that it's managing. So I guess the idea here is that this can be useful in part of the automated pivoting process, or sort of when a high level component tries to ensure pivoting, it can select, it can use this functionality. I'm not entirely sure actually what this functionality.
It's sort of crucial in pivoting because a bundle instance is supposed to select over, like, so replica sets select over multiple pods, deployments over replica sets. The same thing here, like we have a bundle that a bundle instance can generate multiple new bundle resources with the inline. Also, it could reference multiple, and you want to be able to tell what it has previously referenced in the past from what it is currently referencing. If that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that does make more sense, definitely. If we look at it as like replica sets managing pods, bundles, I guess it hasn't really occurred to me that I think we all right now we see a one-to-one mapping between bundles and bundle instances, but you're describing a world where it's one to many potentially.
Yeah, the whole point of bundle instance is to pivot over bundles. If we didn't need to pivot over multiple bundles at different points of time, then we wouldn't need that, you know, bundle instance resource at all. We would just have a single resource that does it.
Yeah, Dan, I was hesitant about this at first, but I think I might have made a comment later down the chain. But right now, pivoting is a manual process where you'd have to update the spec.bundle name or whatever that field is in the bundle instance API. But if you think about it, where it has a label selector, well, now the controller isn't responsible for manually updating or modifying any spec fields. It's just responsible for propagating that state to the status, which just seems like controller's best practice right there.
Okay. If we add a label selector, controller responsible for making pivot decisions, all it needs to read that value and then pivot to a new bundle resource.
I'm still, so I might be like slow here, but I'm like, I think like in general, I agree that it, like the way that deployments and replica sets work with pods, I envision like that's how pivoting works here. I guess maybe I just don't know enough about deployments and replica sets, but it might help to see a picture of like a step-by-step. Here's what a controller or a human, let's just go with a human, right? A human is looking at a bundle instance and wants to pivot from one version of the bundle to a different bundle. Like what do the label selectors change from and to cause that pivot to happen? That might be
they don't
to explain.
I don't know, maybe I didn't read this. Oh, selection of bundles. Okay. Right. I need to go back to my strawman and look at that compared to this. There might have been some stuff lost in translation. Particularly, I was interested in, at least in the strawman, with bundle instances selecting over the resources that they generate from a bundle.
Well,
Yeah, that
Not
makes
in a
sense.
bundle. Yeah, and so like a bundle instances, as you pivot them, they need to both keep track of all the previous resources that they've created and all the new ones, and the diff them and like do the transform between the old bundle and the new one.
Gotcha.
I was
like the bundle
this-
object,
yeah.
like the manifest, not the bundle itself, like the bundle object itself.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Sorry if I
Okay,
misspoke earlier.
that makes total sense. Yeah. That's what we do now. It's just not exposed on the bundle instance spec. Like right now, it's hard-coded labels that Helm gives us for free. And I think we've talked about separately, like, well, what pieces of Helm do we like and what pieces do we not like, and which ones, like, if we're going to drop Helm, what are the things that need to carry forward, and that would be one of them.
yeah. Okay, so seems like this issue, maybe this is still the 03 is maybe early for this. I'm not sure. It seems like there might still be some designer.
Yeah, it seems
ironing out
reasonable
some-
to punt this the backlog, Dan. I don't know if anyone has
Yeah.
any strong opinions about doing that.
Yeah, I think it needs more like.
I think this might be incorrect in its description, if that's the case, or
Yeah,
just
no,
entirely
that's-
different.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think there might be some skew with going over the end-to-end strawman, because Nick, what you described seems pretty valuable. I didn't see it called out explicitly in the strawman, but it's been a while. But certainly the value add here doesn't seem very high.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
I think
so
it's high if we are going to drop Helm, right? So if we get to the point that we're like, okay, Helm's not what we want, then we basically got to do this. But I don't know if we've arrived yet at that point with Helm.
It's kind of weird that the first class behaviors aren't codified at the RuckPack API level, but we're relying on implementation details of Helm and promoting them as if they were first class RuckPack features. Like I would expect it to be called out first as a RuckPack feature and then backfill. Like I get that, it was a shortcut, but
Well, I don't think it's necessary to have these exposed in the API. We could always just say, we're going to derive some labels and label selectors that we're going to put on your stuff. And then I think what this is saying is, well, maybe it would actually be nice if you could specify the labels and label selectors that are going to get used, which, okay, like maybe that's valuable, but I think we can, like, I don't think the API requires this. Clearly it doesn't, because we've got something working now. And maybe there's a use case that we haven't covered with what we have now. And if we get to that use case and we prioritize that, then sure, let's go do it.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there should be a API contract about the way bundle resources are pivoted for all provisioners. Like all provisioners need to be able to pivot resources like this, and they should show these things in the status, and they should do it via, label selectors, and how that label scheme works is up to them. That first chunk of things that I said,
Yeah.
seems like
I
we're
think that
missing
makes
that.
Yeah. I guess the question is like we know that we don't have a stable API yet, right? So like maybe we can say this is a must be done by 1.0 kind of feature. But the question is like, where are we deriving the most value right now?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think let's backlog this one, keep it open for now. Potentially in the future we'll have more clarity on what we want to do with this, or what this represents exactly. Okay, so let's see what else we have in 0.3. Support logical deletion of objects when deleting bundle instances. This is an interesting issue. It largely came about from some of the existing pain points of OLM, where basically removing an operator or uninstalling didn't necessarily delete objects in a way that was particularly conducive to the operator tearing down its resources successfully. So it talks about a more fine-grained removal policy, maybe somehow exposing finalizers or some way of essentially ensuring that, for example, the RBAC associated with the operator deployment isn't gone before the deployment is gone. Things like that.
Yeah, this I think really gets into the question of should CRDs and controllers live in the same bundle, right? Like that's what this comes down to. Because if you're deleting CRDs, then you're deleting operands, and if you're deleting operands, then your deployment has to be around, and your API webhooks have to be around. So there's like all of these kind of interesting consequences of deleting all of these things, quote unquote, at the same time. Whereas if an API bundle was a separate thing from a controller bundle, then maybe you could like delete the API bundle and know that like I can just delete this blindly, knowing that I'm not deleting my controller bundle, and that's fine. But that's like a huge can of worms that we've talked about ad nauseum, and we still have to keep talking about.
Yeah, it's definitely been extensively discussed. Let's say assuming that we have one bundle though, or right, let's say we just have one bundle, and then how can we expose to like I guess the authors of the bundle how the uninstallation process should work for their particular bundle. It's not something that exists in OLM or maybe anywhere. I don't know. I don't know if Helm does anything around this.
So Helm has like a sorting function that it has an opinion on like the way that you install, and then it does a reverse sort for uninstall.
Okay.
The problem is like Helm doesn't cover all the cases that OLM would need to cover in terms of all the different interesting extra things that get added when you're dealing with operators.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if we can rely on, so you know how we're like thinking about extracting validation for CRDs, like this extra special sauce into a validating webhook. Could we also do the same thing for most cases of deletions, where we just like prevent deletions when certain other resources haven't been deleted first or whatever, and then we rely on the eventual consistency of the controller to eventually delete everything and keep that the status up to date?
Possibly. I think there's one KEP in the Kubernetes enhancements that so you can say if this other object exists, then I can't be deleted. And I think that could go a long way. And the question then would be like, does RuckPack somehow instrument those liens, or do we just tell authors like you got to put the liens on the right things for the things that you expect to stick around? And I would probably vote for the latter. Like I would rather have RuckPack be extremely stupid and just rely on the existing API mechanisms that Kubernetes provides. At least at first, right? Like I don't want to try to build any complexity that we don't have to.
Yeah. And so I guess the webhook idea is kind of like a natural next best thing from that. Like if it's not available in the Kube API, then offload it to something else that's not part of the core Ruckpack code base that can be shared by all of the provisioners, like opaquely. And then
Yeah, that would mean like implementing our own lean thing, right?
Yeah, you could do that. There's also like the complete opposite end of the spectrum is some way to introduce topological sorting of resources, and like some secondary API that allows you to do some things as like an atomic transaction. So like API for Kube that you send a resource list and it turns on that until it's made done. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that second option is interesting.
The hard part with that second option is like if it never completes because it gets into some some state where like you deleted the API service or you deleted the deployment that serves an API service or whatever the order is right now, like you're just stuck forever unless you go and manually do stuff.
Yeah, I wonder if you could do it
out.
I wonder if you could do it as in I'm just throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks here, but you do an API service where there's a the thing that it's providing is a list type and it tries to do everything in one transaction, or like one request will try to do everything, and if any part of that fails, it undoes its whatever it did. Or I think there's some stuff down that avenue that you could do.
Yeah,
but I haven't really thought them out.
That's kind of the inverse of like the attempt to do an upgrade, and if the upgrade fails, put things back, with less risk of like changing state and causing problems. Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Like the ultimate, like the final goal here is like KCP, right? But I'm not gonna opine on that here.
I do think the eventual consistency deletion is important, right? Because if people haven't put the right things in the right order, like we can still keep trying. And if we get lucky and delete the one thing that was required to let the other things be deleted, then we can try again. So I think we definitely need that piece of it.
I guess that we need to implement that anyway, no matter what. So why isn't it the first thing that we implement? I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, right now, the way it works is we put owner references on everything and we delete the bundle instance. Done, right? And then it's up to the garbage collector controller, which for the vast majority of cases is probably fine, especially if, well, now I guess that's where like if the deployment gets deleted before the CRDs do, then the CRDs can't be deleted because the CRs can't be deleted because they still have finalizers on them. So we're going to have to solve that problem fairly quickly.
Right. I think what we have now is somewhat similar to the OwnRF system in OLM, where the CSV OwnRFs all resources, not the CRDs, but like all the resources potentially. So it's similar.
This one's a little better because we can have it own anything in the cluster since it's a cluster scoped API, but yeah, same idea.
Right. Yeah, no, so it's interesting. I think, I don't know, it seems like this definitely needs some more design work too for 0.3, but we can take a stab at it.
And maybe what we could do is like some sort of abstraction where you can tell us what strategy you want us to use for deletion, and like we could use our own sort. You could say like topological, in which case we'll just sort by the name of the manifest or whatever. Like there's different ways that we could potentially expose some extension, a little bit of an extension point there. So that's another kind of thought that I just randomly had.
Yeah.
In my mind, what I would probably say is the very first thing we should do is just try to sort them in the order that we think is best, and see if that is fruitful at all.
Does this also, do we also run into the problem where there are things that a deployment needs to run during shutdown that it's prevented from doing when it's like RBAC gets deleted, right?
Right.
And we have the problem in OLM. So even if the ordering might help, but
yeah, like in that case, off the top of my head, it seems like first you have to delete the CRDs, then you have to delete the webhook configuration. Like there's a certain order, and it seems like RBAC is last.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was actually thinking first that would be the deployment, because you need to signal the deployment to, or whatever the executable resources is that has like the potential for a cleanup lifecycle. You need to signal it first and tell it, hey, you're shutting down. So that'd be the first thing to delete. And only once that resource is completely gone, containers are all shut down, that you could delete everything else.
Well, the problem is if you do that, then the finalizer the controller that's handling the finalizers needs to be running when you delete the objects. Otherwise, the objects get a deletion timestamp and then just sit there without ever being deleted, and it blocks your deletion. So this is another interesting thing which I've thought about, which is maybe we should start encouraging operator authors to have a separate controller just for handling finalizers that lives with their API rather than with their operator.
That's interesting.
Like I said, this is a huge rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely maybe quite a complex issue. So maybe supporting all logical deletion might be a big step, but maybe we can do something in that direction, since it's basically an unsolved problem, I think, to some degree. So for operators anyway. With that, I think we're out of time for today. I think it was really productive milestone grooming issue triaging session for RUCPAC. It's really nice. Thank you everyone for coming. We'll have more issue triage next week on core OLM. So yeah, I think that's it for today. Thanks everyone.